Welcome to Driven. I'm your host, Paul Perrone. We're going to learn and talk about AI, robotics, autonomous vehicles, and so much more. Check us out at driven.show on the web and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. So kick back or buckle up and become driven. Well, Bill, good to see you again.
It's always good to see you, Paul.
We just caught up 2 minutes ago, but now we're really catching up here on this podcast. So,
Absolutely.
I've known you for quite a while. I met you at the Jacksonville Transportation Authority. I don't know, it was kind of pre-pandemic or post-pandemic days. I don't remember.
It was probably actually I think it was mid-pandemic. It was right there as we were getting into it, probably mid-2020.
Wow. Yeah. So you have a really interesting career, a lot of automotive experience between Coda, Fisker, other companies. You got into the autonomous vehicle space, and you had a brief stint, which we want to talk about, with brewing, which I think is fascinating. I tried to brew my beer once, and I'll talk about that. It was an abysmal failure. It tasted terrible. And now you are the COO, Chief Operating Officer of DeLorean Motor Reimagined, I think is the official name.
Yep, exactly. It's the kind of the new version of trying to bring the original DeLorean back to life. So that's what we're doing now here in Texas.
That's awesome. Where in Texas is that actually?
Right now we're in San Antonio. So we're right here in San Antonio. There's a lot of options around here. You know, you got Austin that's kind of blowing up. You got a lot of opportunity down in Mexico. So it's this nice kind of right in the middle of where everything's happening.
Yeah. And great weather, right?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I like the heat, from Florida. So the heat's nothing, but it's a little drier here than I'm used to, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the COO is an important position, and I'm sure you touch on a lot of different things because I know our COO pretty much does everything. So I'm sure you've got your hands on a lot of different things, but just for everyone's benefit, some of the younger folks who might be listening in don't know as much about DeLorean. A lot of people, when they hear DeLorean, they think, of course, of Back to the Future and the car that was in that. It's an iconic brand. Can you just comment on why it's iconic and a little bit about what, your perspective of the history of the DeLorean Motor Company?
That could be 6-7 hour conversation with John DeLorean and all the stuff that's gone on with it. But I will I'll try to kind of distill it down. And if you're interested, there's quite a few documentaries on Netflix that are very interesting that can probably tell the story much better than me. But 40 years ago, there was John DeLorean started this car company. He was, kind of a legend in the muscle car history in the American automotive industry. And so he spun off, went to do his own thing. And what's famous about the DeLorean, the DMC-12, is that the body is stainless steel. Like, this was a revolutionary thing. It was very exotic, very cool. It was made out in Ireland. And then, it kind of went through some a bit of a tumultuous history, and then eventually went bankrupt. And then what happened is that kind of fast forward, the vehicle was used in some of the movies, back in the 80s, Back to the Future. I think there was 3 of them, 1, 2, and 3. And then it was in a couple other movies. And the brand's been alive for the past 30, 40 years. And that's been, a big part to the Wynn family, who bought the trademark, all the parts. They've been restoring the vehicle since then. So the brand's been alive. And over the last couple years, we've been trying to bring the company back to life, as far as we are in the process of building another DeLorean vehicle. It'll be an electric vehicle, and it'll be fast. It'll be fun to drive, and it'll be a driver's car. So there's a lot of stuff going on. There's been, the capital markets over the last few years have been a little difficult. We've adjusted our plan a little bit. We've got some new things coming up. I can't speak too much to it because a lot of our partners are confidential at this point. Nothing's been finally inked, but we're definitely making some progress. So that's where we're going to be in the future. Is we're going to be releasing a new vehicle. Stay tuned. That's all I can really say as far as what's happening here in the future with the vehicle. But it will be exciting. It will be a lot of fun, and it'll be a car that I think will really pay tribute to the original legacy of John DeLorean and the DeLorean name, the brand, and just the fact it's this exotic vehicle. Kind of what would the vehicle be now, pushing those limits of, incorporating new technologies into one platform. So hopefully we'll get it in the next, you'll be able to see something here in the next year or two on the streets. Driving around, doing some testing, things like that. I can't make any promises because I don't know what the future holds, but that's kind of where we're at. And it's just been this legacy that everyone, whether it be video games, movies, it's this brand and this name in this vehicle that people have known for years. I mean, I grew up watching the Back to the Future movies and seeing these cars. And so it's fun. It's fun to be a part of something that's got such a history to it. So that's where we're at now. And hopefully something will come out of it here pretty soon.
Yeah. I mean, the look of the classic DeLorean was certainly seemed like it was something that was ahead of its time back at that time.
Sure. Yeah.
And to some extent, I mean, I'm sure others have talked about this. I mean, to what extent has Elon Musk and his Cybertruck been inspired by the DeLorean design?
I think quite a bit. I don't know the details. I mean, we're not buddies or anything, but I'm pretty sure that there's some type of influence there. Which I think is pretty cool. I mean, even 30, 40 years later, you can still kind of see where, the ripple effect of this vehicle being seen around the industry, which I think is pretty cool. So yeah.
Yeah. And was it the first to have like the gull wing doors on a sort of a mass produced or mass producible vehicle?
I can't say for sure, but I think that would be a good guess, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a good guess for sure. I mean, again, the gull wing doors is a pretty cool feature, and something that even if it wasn't the first, it was definitely a prominent feature of the DMC-12 that people recognize, and it's unique, right? You got the stainless steel, the doors. There's a lot of nuances to it that I think are really kind of cutting edge as far as at the time, and the design and the style, and kind of being bold, moving forward. So yeah, I think that's pretty exciting.
It must have been hard for back then, and I'm sure it's still hard now, but in a different sense, to be a new automotive company competing in a space where there's giants, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I remember seeing the movie Tucker. I don't know how real to life that was, representative of the Tucker automobile and other automotive companies, and just whatever government organizations kind of conspiring. Of course, it was a movie; they have to make it entertaining. I have no idea what's reality or not, but the concept of just trying to compete in this space back in the day, was daunting, and I guess less so today because you're seeing a lot more companies pop up, especially in the electric vehicle space. What are some of the difficulties and impediments to being a newcomer in this space today?
Well, I mean, I think you've seen it. I mean, Tesla has been at it for 20 years. I mean, they're killing it. They're doing a great job. You've got some amazing vehicles out there. You've got Lucid is an amazing vehicle, amazing technology, powertrain. Rivian's doing a great product. I mean, these vehicles take billions of dollars to develop a platform. So it's difficult. And I think it's just the money, right? And then once you get it, you've got Ford, GM, and even now Tesla. They've been in the market for 20 years plus 100 years. So they've got a name behind it, and people know that, oh, I'm buying a Ford. Like, they're comfortable with that. They're buying a Dodge. They're comfortable with that. They don't know a Lucid or Rivian, despite how good that technology is. They're amazing vehicles. But what's nice is that people are starting to realize that it's okay to buy a new vehicle. But still, it takes a lot of money. You got to develop the platform. You got to develop the service network, distribution. You got to be planning for the future. So I think it's just money, right? It's just money. You gotta have a lot of money, talking billions of dollars, to get something like this going. So we've got to approach that. We don't think it's going to take us billions of dollars, but we're still talking hundreds of millions to put a vehicle out on the market. So I would say that's the biggest hurdle to overcome, is that these incumbents have been there for years. And to get into the market, you're talking billions. I mean, I've been in the industry. I mean, I started as into college at the General Motors Institute at Flint, Michigan, because I wanted to be in the automotive industry. And that's, 20 something years ago. So I've been in the industry for years. And as you mentioned before, I worked with Fisker. That was 15 years ago. And they're still coming along, pushing forward. I worked with Coda, a little company out of LA, 10, 12 years ago, and they're no longer around. And, they tried. They tried for a more of an economy car, but if you just couldn't get it cheap enough. So it's a tough market for sure. And so you got to have a lot of money to get in there. You got to wow the people. It's got to look good. It's got to perform. And so I think it just takes money, right? It's tough. You got to have a name. You got to build that reputation. Money and reputation is what's going to take to really kind of set someone apart from the crowd.
Yeah. Well, there's the design, which obviously takes some money, and then designing to meet, I'm sure, a lot of different regulations, right?
Yeah.
To FMVSS compliance and all of these, things that the vehicle has to be. But I think I seem to recall, either in an interview or maybe in a book or something, Elon Musk commenting about how the most difficult problem is the manufacturing. That the like setting up the manufacturing process, and that was just the most daunting task for
Absolutely.
Tesla.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got some history with low volume manufacturing, doing like 6 to 8 vehicles a day. And that was difficult, but it was still a little more. You could have some technicians on the line where they had a little more time to fix some issues here and there. But if you've got cars coming back past you every couple minutes, I mean, there's no room for error. So that's where you got someone like Toyota making Camrys, Corollas. Whether you like those vehicles or not, you can't argue the quality and the repeatability. And, back to the beer you mentioned, Bud Light, Budweiser, Miller Lite, whether you like those beers or not, those are high quality products. I mean, no matter where you go, you buy Bud Light, it's the same product, regardless of the plant you go to. And that's where you got to have that repeatability. You got to have the processes. I mean, you can't have any float within these body panels or within these ingredients. So imagine the difficulty when you're putting out tens, thousands, hundreds of thousands of vehicles a year. That is incredible feat. And that's why these plants cost hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to make, is that you've got to have the quality. You've got laser measurement systems. I mean, the systems in place to do this is just incredible. So yeah, you can design anything. And again, back to the beer world, right? You can make any good beer once, but can you make it 1,000 times? You can make one good car once if you've got the time and the effort, but can you make it 100,000 times in a row, having the same quality from car 1 to car 7 to car 2,000? That's hard. That is not easy. And that's a big discipline too. There's a lot of people that go into trying to make that work. So yeah, absolutely. It's tough. It's tough.
Well, I remember back in 2000, I think it was like 8 or 9. I was actually working with Neil Young, the guy, the musician, and he was taking a Lincoln, a 1959 Lincoln Continental, and converting it into a clean, energy efficient vehicle platform. And so I wasn't doing the automotive type stuff. We were bringing in the automation into the vehicle with him. But I thought, well, he's going to make an electric car. Electric vehicles just seemed simple to me. I'm an electrical engineer by formal training. And I thought, well, yeah, you have an electric motor and you have batteries. That's a lot simpler than an internal combustion engine, which is much more complex, at least by construction process.
Yeah.
But electric vehicles, aside from sort of say like Tesla and some of the other newcomers, some of the electric vehicles that have been in the market have had reliability issues. Some of
Hmm.
them, right? And so it's and I guess I'm just assuming that that's due to the low volume production and the manufacturing, and not due to the fact that, I mean, these are should be simpler
Yeah.
and therefore easy.
Right.
They should be
Right.
theoretically, and I want you to dispel any misconceptions, right, that I have. But this is sort of what's in my brain,
Yeah.
and please dispel the misconceptions. But it seems like it should be simpler because
Hmm.
of the these more simple parts theoretically, but in practice, it's been a little bit more difficult for some of these EV companies. So
Hmm.
any commentary on why that is? Like what are the fundamental reasons for that, or is it a misconception?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, you've got a new technology, regardless of what it is. Even though Tesla's been doing it for 20 years, Toyota's been doing it with the Prius, right? That's a hybrid, and it's still newer technology to a internal combustion engine, to a nice powertrain, where that's been around for years and years and years and years. So even even a new engine is still an old engine with a new design, where this is all new technology. The technology that's advancing in the electric vehicle industry is much faster than in the combustion engine industry, because that's even the R&D is slowing down on that side. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's just new technology. You've got the manufacturing process where, again, you could probably build one vehicle that would last 10 years with no problem. But if you're going into this high volume, even just piecing anything together that's newer, you're going to have some issues, right? And then also, I think because it's new technology, you get a lot of this, everyone's interested in it. So if there's any issues with reliability or safety, everyone really focuses on it. They're saying, hey, look, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. I read a stat the other day doing some research, and there was a study that determined that electric vehicles, or I'm sorry, that combustion engine vehicles are 83 times more likely to catch fire. So I'm sure that some people are going to argue that, and it may not be exact, but that was a study that I read. I'm sure there's different data elsewhere. But the thing is that when electric vehicles catch fire, it's a really big event because it's new and it's something that people aren't necessarily familiar with. So now they're saying, oh my God, these vehicles catch fire. I'm sure they do from time to time, but also combustion engines catch fire. I mean, you're driving around with a fuel tank full of gasoline that's designed to explode. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of nuances that go back and forth into, is it safer? Is it more reliable? Is it this? Is it that? I think it's all going to balance out in the future. And I'm just one opinion. I mean, I'm sure everyone else has their opinions as well. But to your point, Paul, is that, I mean, yeah, electric powertrains are easy. And that's a big reason why in the vehicle we're developing now, we like to go electric, because you've got a high voltage system, you've got a battery, and you've got a drive unit. And you just have to get the controls in there and make sure they work. You can program it. You can set, the torque map. You can do all kinds of different things to make sure that the vehicle operates exactly how you want. And you've got much more flexibility. And you've got a much wider operational band than you do with a combustion engine, which you really have to focus on, what RPMs you're hitting. You have to focus on your fuel ratio. And there's a lot of different things you got to look at. And people over the years have done a phenomenal job of operating and controlling these, combustion engines. And then as you get into the electric vehicles, you just have an even more finely tuned ability to control that at a much lower fidelity, or higher fidelity, I should say, right? So I don't know. That's my thought. Again, I'm one opinion, but I think you can argue both sides. But as far as some of the issues go and the reliability, I think it's a new process. And in 10 years, that reliability is going to be even higher. In 20 years, it's going to be even higher. Just, I mean, look at, 50, 70 years ago at combustion engines and vehicles, 50 years ago. My dad always has a joke. He says that, back in the day, he had a VW Beetle. He's like, I used to pull into the gas station. I used to tell him to check the gas and fill the oil. So, I mean,
Right.
it's like things are different over time, and,
Sure.
process is better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, absolutely. And I think advantages are conferred to those companies not unlike DeLorean and others that are aiming to sort of produce these more at a mass level,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
At a larger quantities because efficiencies come with quantity,
Hmm.
and whereas like some of the platforms that are low volume production have can't. I mean, there can be advantages, but there can be these cons because
Hmm.
you don't have the consistent manufacturing process. Maybe I mean it's kind of that's my theory,
Yeah.
not even an opinion.
Right. Right.
But,
Yeah.
whether it's true or false, I don't know. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting. I guess the batteries now have to are a major component, of course, in electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Um, and I knew of one, uh, I guess it was kind of a vehicle, like a van type company that had problems electric van company that had problems sourcing batteries, right?
Hmm.
And they're trying to also meet like things like Buy America compliance, and
Hmm.
it's very
Hmm.
difficult. So your options are very limited.
Yeah.
And so, how difficult is it to get batteries? And who makes batteries these days for cars? I remember A1 at one point, and that like who makes the batteries? I know Tesla makes their own, right? Don't they?
Right. Right. There's quite a few organizations out there that make the batteries, and to get into specifics, I would have to refer to my buddy and our CTO, Ben. But I do know that as far as the overall industry and supply chain, I mean, if anyone's read the news, you can see that some of the larger players are starting to scale down some of their EV predictions and plans for the future. So as the industry was ramping up the supply chain to provide these batteries, drive units, and other components for the power for the electric vehicles, as they were ramping up, some of these big players are starting to ramp down a little bit. So I think there's going to be a surplus coming in here pretty soon, and it's going to allow for a little more competition. Also, I do know there's some big players, and there's one out of the UK who I can't speak to because I don't know if they've announced it, but I do know that they're looking to set up a facility here in the US, I believe in Georgia, South Carolina, somewhere, to build their batteries here in the US. And that way they can provide their products to some of these organizations that do require Buy America or other type of requirements, and also to be closer to this supply chain where you've got Michigan all the way down through the Midwest, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee. You've got a ton of opportunity in there for sharing in the supply chain, economies of scale, because that's where everyone's kind of located. So I do know that there are some organizations from outside the US moving into the US, and they're trying to be part of this, American ecosystem. And I do think that over the next year or two, you're going to see more of a surplus and you're going to see a lot more competition. Even in the vehicles now, you see they're slashing prices. And I think that that's going to be definitely a benefit to the consumer. And there's going to be some more options for the manufacturers here in the next few years, which is also going to benefit the consumers because there's going to be more options. I think there's going to be, better negotiation for pricing, for better technology. And then the end winner is going to be the consumer as this also as the charging infrastructure grows. Everyone's moving to NACS, so they're kind of getting away from the other standard as far as charging. So I think you're going to start to see over the next few years, everyone start to realize that it's a little more competitive than what they thought, and I think that's going to be an end result, a net positive for the consumer in the end. I think right now there's a bit of a shift. I think everyone was pushing high, and now the supply chain was ramping up. I think the manufacturers are starting to kind of level out and almost ramp down a little bit based on their projections. And I think that's going to create a definite benefit for the industry as a whole. So again, my opinion, my prediction of the future, but I don't think that's too unreasonable to think.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
And I've seen a bit of a pivot for some companies,
hmm
some bus companies that we've been working with, to
hmm
hydrogen as a
yeah.
source as well.
hmm
I don't know if you have any thoughts or opinion on that.
Um, yeah, there's a few. You've got the hydrogen fuel cell. I know there's a few companies out there. Plastic Omnium's doing some fantastic work with pushing hydrogen fuel cell into the industry with some of the larger buses, things like that. Again, the issue with that is going to be the cost of getting the infrastructure set up. You can refill very quickly, but the cost of a refueling station is incredibly high. So I think this is where you can get some benefit from some government organizations and utilities that have large fleets that they can set up a system, and then maybe people can share, those refueling stations. But I think that's an opportunity. I'm definitely not an expert in that world, but I do see it coming around, and it's making some more traction as we move into the future here a little bit. But I haven't dealt much with that. I've always stayed kind of primarily on the battery side of the
Yeah.
electric vehicles. Yeah. Yeah.
See the clue was provided for us, and at the end of Back to the Future 1, the doctor used garbage to fuel the vehicle.
Right. Sure.
There's the silver bullet.
That's it. That's it. If we can only get to that point, right? That'd be amazing.
There's a lot of garbage. The garbage is plentiful.
Is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we start using methane, right?
Well, it was weird. When we were working on the Link Volt project, one of the guys was telling me about these alternative fuels. I think there was one called lipo-diesel.
Oh,
you ever heard of that?
No, I have not. Where's this going?
It's liposuction.
That's
like, as a fuel refuse. Isn't that terrible? I was like, I would never ride in it. I would never ride in that vehicle. I'm a germaphobe. So
yeah, good point. Well, did it ever go anywhere? What never happened with that? I've never seen it.
Oh, we didn't use it on that project. It's just one of the guys who was the scientist on it told me about it.
I got you.
While I was eating lunch, because he knew it would have an effect on me.
Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, never heard
that. Good.
No.
Yeah. Well, it apparently exists. I guess look it up. It's on the internet, but be careful what you click on.
Yeah,
That's
right. Be careful what you look for. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. Excellent.
So how does the just a couple more things about the DeLorean?
Yeah.
How does the sort of the iconic car platform, and maybe you can't share this yet, but how does it drive the new design that's coming out? Is it embodied? Or is it just going to be a completely new thing? And again, if you can't say it, you can't say it.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely. I mean, you can always talk about the theory. I can't talk about the specifics by any means, but absolutely. Where it was such an iconic design, iconic vehicle in the beginning. Now, as we roll into the new vehicle and what we're doing, it's gotta be a DeLorean, right? As you're driving down the road, you've got to look at a vehicle and be like, that looks like it could be a DeLorean, right? But is it not? So that's kind of what we're going for, where we don't want it to look like the original vehicle, and we don't want to depart too far away from anything just to have a cool new vehicle. So the idea is to continue our design efforts and come up with a vehicle that definitely resembles and has key design cues from the original, but is a unique new vehicle. Just like if you look at a Mustang, like a new Mustang compared to a 1990, you can tell it's still the same vehicle. Same thing with Corvette, where I don't know, the new Corvette's a pretty extreme departure from a 1990. But if you follow along, you can still see there's particular design cues along the way. Same thing with the Camaro and some of these other vehicles like that. So that's the intent we're going for. We're definitely pay tribute. And I happen to say that a lot. Like, we definitely want to not forget about where we came from. That's critical. We wouldn't be here today without where we came from before. So we definitely have to acknowledge the original and the roots of where the origination story of that vehicle. But what would it look like today? What's that progress to get to where we are today? So that's the intent. Are we using stainless steel? I don't know. Maybe not. It's not really the best. It's heavy. It's not really the best, component to use for body panels. Maybe we will. If anything, I think there's definitely be some cool materials that we're going to be using. Incorporate some stainless steel features into it as far as, where we came from, things like that. We definitely want to showcase where the vehicle came from in some of these cool new materials. So I can definitely say that. What unique, design aspects is it going to have? I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. right? I'd
Sure.
rather be released in time, and the final, vehicle that we're going to be releasing, I think is going to be, I think everyone's going to be happy. And we want to make sure that the original lovers of the DMC 12 can appreciate where we're at now, and the new generation can appreciate the vehicle now and understand where it came from. So there's definitely a difficult, market that we got to hit. Whereas, when I was younger, when the movies came out, I was not old enough to buy a car, but now I'm old enough to buy one of these cars. So I want to, that'd be cool, right? But also, someone that's maybe 25 years old that, is able to afford a new vehicle coming out like this, we want them to appreciate it too. So it's difficult. And we want to do our best really to just respect and pay tribute to the original brand. Not everyone's going to like it. Some people are going to love it. We're doing our best. We're trying to hear what everyone's saying and try to be as respectful as possible when that final vehicle, definitely hits the street. So I think I can say that, right?
Yeah. It was definitely
Sure.
inspiring. I kind of have a wall down in my lab of pictures of things that kind of
Yeah.
inspired me during the youth, ranging from robots to cars, and the DeLorean is up there.
Yep.
So is Herbie the Love Bug, if you remember the VW Love Bug.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And
That's
of
probably one
course,
of the first autonomous vehicles, right, Paul?
maybe in movie history. Of course, there's
Yeah.
Kit, Knight Rider,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but yeah, it may have been the first sort of. I didn't put Christine up there. It was just
Yeah.
that was an autonomous vehicle of a different ilk. It had a
Right.
different mission. It didn't have
Yeah.
obstacle. It had obstacle detection, but it didn't get the avoidance part down right.
No, it didn't. No, for sure.
So,
That's very
and
cool.
that was a feature, not a flaw in that vehicle design.
Yeah.
So that was
Well,
ironic.
are there any vehicles, back from your past that gave you the inspiration to go through and to pursue the autonomous world?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, Knight Rider
Yeah.
as a kid, I loved that show, and it's funny. I've been watching it with my son more recently, and you
Okay.
realize how corny and
Yeah.
those shows were, and the plot always involves some like really bad group of people that
Mhm.
want to that just for no really good reason at all. Someone just ran a red light or something. They just want to kill that person. So it's just a bunch of maniacal, murderous thieves and fiends that Kit and
Yeah.
David Hasselhoff have to go, tackle and
Yeah,
put in
right.
jail. It's
Yeah.
funny, but
Yeah.
no, but that was a car. Of
Sure.
course, Star Wars was um, an interesting and
Mhm.
influential movie
Right.
to me. There seems to be two camps where were you a Star Wars fanatic or a Star Trek fanatic? And I like them both, but I was more on the Star Wars side for whatever
Mm.
reason. So
I was more
obviously,
on the Star Trek side.
okay. And I wonder I don't know what the difference is. Maybe it was
I
just
don't know.
because it just was the timing for me. It was just
Mm.
1976, and I was kind of just going to the movies at that time, right?
Yep.
With the
Yep.
folks. But
Yeah. That's awesome.
the futuristic things in there were of course an inspiration to me.
Mhm.
How about yourself?
Yeah.
So what were some of the things that, because you got into the automotive space, that inspired
Yeah.
you to kind of get into this world?
Uh, I don't know. My dad was never into cars. Um, my, I grew up in Southwest Florida, and there wasn't really like a car scene. I didn't really have anyone in my family that was into cars. But when I was younger, that's just what I did. That's, I knew I wanted to be a mechanic or an engineer from when I was a kid, like young. And I would just get into things. I started off with remote control cars. I would build them, when I was probably like 10, 11 years old. I would build remote control cars from scratch. I'd swap out the motors. I'd be, soldering the battery packs. I'd be getting servos and all these things. I mean, I'm 12 years old. That's all I had access to. And then as I got older, I just that kind of parlayed into full size vehicles. And I remember a buddy of mine, and a thing that we would do in Inglewood, Florida, where I grew up, is that you could go to the post office and buy an old mail Jeep for like $50 or $100. It was dirt cheap. And I was 14, my buddy was 15. We bought this old mail Jeep and we got it running. And since we didn't have our license, we would just drive it through the ditches in our city, through our town. And so we're driving these mail Jeeps around and we're fixing them. And I've always got a story I was telling my buddy the other day where, the mail Jeep was busted. And I mean, this thing's got to be 30, 40 years old. The old mail Jeeps, you're driving on the right-hand side. The seat was a milk crate and it wasn't running and something happened. So, we had to go to the Napa Auto Parts. So I threw the flywheel in the back of my backpack and I rode my bike like 5 miles to the Napa with a flywheel in my backpack. And this thing had to weigh 45 pounds, which was like half my weight. Like 14 years old, I'm like 120 pounds, riding my bike through town. And there was a milk crate for the driver's seat. I've got the flywheel and my backpack. I go to Napa and they help me out. And I'm 14 years old, but that's what we did. And so I got my first car, and no matter what, I worked on it. Then in high school, I took every, automotive class I could where, we were changing the oil for all the teachers. We were, doing things like that. And our shop had a drag car. It was an old Camaro, and we would work on it. And I remember my buddy and I working on it. We must have burned up like 3 alternators. Now, I don't know why, but again, I'm 15 years old. And we were just working on it. We burning up these alternators. I put a new one in, and we'd put in new clutches, we'd put in new transmissions, and all this stuff. Had a welded rear end. I mean, this thing was, to me, it was the most amazing, powerful thing in the world. And we would take it to these abandoned streets out in the outskirts of town, and we would race this thing. I mean, there's no way that we'd be allowed to do that now. Right? A bunch of, 15, 16-year-old kids work on this car in shop class and then go with their teacher and race this thing in abandoned streets. Like, there's no way, but like, I just loved it. So I couldn't stop pursuing this automotive desire. And my parents are from Michigan. And I said, hey, I want to be a mechanic, right? That's what I wanted to do. I want to be a mechanic. My dad's like, you're really good at math. And so, like, when I took my SATs, I like aced the math portion and barely even completed the English portion. And my wife still makes fun of me because when I read now, she'll show me something to read. And it'll take me like 7 minutes to read like 3 lines of text. I'm terrible. Like, I can't read. I'm very deliberate. And so I knew my strengths. I knew my weaknesses. So I ended up going to a school in Michigan called GMI, the General Motors Institute, started by GM in 1919. In a way to groom and train their potential engineers in the future. It was very automotive based. Like, my electives were like physics 2, a math class. One of my electives was like a fluids class. There was no English. There was no electives. It was just science, math, engineering. That's it. And I loved it. And also getting out of town, growing up in Southwest Florida, growing up on boats, we go camping on islands. Like, that's how I grew up, being at the beach all the time. It was amazing. And then I went to Flint, Michigan, which, I mean, I'm sure everyone's heard of Flint, Michigan, lead and water, this and that. But Flint at one point was like going to be the Paris of the Midwest. And that's when GM started this company, this school. And there was a ton of work going on. It was flourishing. You can even drive around Flint now, and there's amazing neighborhoods where you can tell how affluent the city was. But when I started there, the late 90s, I was there, and I think I graduated 2003. It's now called Kettering University. They've switched the name to Kettering, but at the time when I started, it was GMI. This school was amazing to get engineers ready for the automotive world. And now in general, just the engineering world. And I just fell in love with engineering, and everything I've ever done has a foundation of engineering. And so that's kind of how I progressed. And one of the beauties of that school is that you go to school for 3 months and you go to work for 3 months as a co-op program. There's no summer break.
Yeah.
There's no spring break. It's just nonstop. And also, I liked it because when I was at work, I was able to make money to help pay for school because I needed that help. Like I had nothing, right? So I had a couple jobs going through school, and I had a job at a large automotive supplier, and I realized that it wasn't for me. I didn't want to work at GM. I didn't want to work at Ford. I love the industry, but it was too big. I got lost in it. And I'm a startup kind of guy. I like building things and creating things. I don't like going to the same job for 20 years, but I still love the industry. So I, I kind of got out of it for a little while. And then I was in vacation down in LA visiting a buddy of mine, and he worked at Celine Automotive. Anyone does know Celine? I mean, they built race cars. Steve Celine started the company. They built race cars, Mustangs. They had the Celine S7 going. That was right at the prime of the Celine S7, fastest car in the world. Race Le Mans. I mean, it's a phenomenal vehicle. And he offered me a job, and that was the perfect blend of automotive, kind of startup, small company. Got my hands in things. That's how I got back into the automotive world. And it was funny because I started there doing, big engine, supercharge intake 3 to 6 miles a gallon. And then while I was in LA, I kind of went through the progression of there was race cars, low MPG, high horsepower, no replacement for displacement, big power. And then I went to Fisker, where it was a hybrid. So now I'm getting into the more efficient vehicles. And then from there, I went to Coda doing electric vehicles. So I started making this progression because I saw where the industry was going. And back then in the automotive industry, the electric vehicles, that was the Wild West. People would get mad at us for working on electric vehicles. They would get physically angry, and you could see their disdain for us for wanting to make these electric vehicles. And I mean, at the time, and I still do it because I just love the technology. I love where it's going, and I love the opportunity of where it can go. It's really exciting. And I've gotten more into the operation side. I mean, hence my position now. I'm head of operations because I like to see how everything ties together. And that's where I like seeing how these new vehicles were coming together. And back then, working at Coda, we had a vehicle that I think it was like 150-mile range. And that was like wild at the time. That was like big news. And now cars are getting, 4 miles per kilowatt hour. So you've got someone like a Lucid that's just getting 400 or 500 miles out of a pack, which is just absolutely incredible. So I mean, it's just exciting, and that's how I've kind of gotten into it. I've always been in it. I've always been, I don't know if you want to say like a car guy, but I even did a stint where I did, I did some, what was it like? Racing where my buddy was like, "Hey, I've got this old beat up Miata. So I want to do, Chump Car." I don't even know if Chump Car's still around, but it's definitely this, this series
Chump
where
Car?
you Chump Car.
Chump Car. Okay. I never heard of that.
Yeah, or like 24 Hours of Lemons. It's like it's like economy racing where everyone's got these Miatas, and we put a new engine in it, we put a roll cage in it, and we'd go to different racetracks around California just to race, just to work on cars because I just like doing it. So I mean, anytime someone's like, "Hey, you want to do something with cars? You want to do this? You want to do that?" I'd always say yes. That was like the biggest thing of wherever I was going, I would say yes, and it's brought me to some amazing places where I spent time in China, France, Finland. I mean, you name it. I met some amazing people as well. The industry has some brilliant people and a lot of funny people, and it's a lot of good people that want to do good things. But I like the small scale. I like the small side of things, and that's just kind of how I ended up here, right? And so, come full circle. I'm back in the auto industry. And Paul, when you and I met, I was doing stuff at JTA, the Jackson Transportation Authority, and that I feel like was just a stroke of luck. Like for some reason, the universe like put us all together. I was in Florida. I was doing some consulting work, and I wanted to get back into the industry. And I love Jacksonville, and I saw there was a position open. It was a director of automation to set up their autonomous vehicle test track up there in Jacksonville. And I applied, and I went in, and the people there, Bernard, Harold, Mike, those guys were amazing. We all just clicked. And I happened to be an automotive engineer that wanted to move to Jacksonville. Like everything came together. And so I just kept my options open, and I just kept my eyes open. And I just always looked at what the next opportunity was, where the industry was going, and how I could be a part of it. And we worked hard there. It was right at the beginning of the pandemic. I'd come home from work and I would immediately take a shower because it was like no one knew what was going on with COVID. I'd walk in, and my daughters were like 1 and 3, and they were all excited and wanted to hug me. And I was like, no, you got to hold off. I'm going to go take a shower. Hold on. Like we didn't know what's going on,
Right.
And they were cooped up all day. But man, we did some amazing things there. And we partnered with people like you and Perone, from robotics. And just if people are open to new technology, seeing where it can go, there's no stopping what opportunities are going to present themselves. And I've always looked into where the next opportunity is, regardless of the technology or the industry. But it was always fun just to look and see where things were going. And so, sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent there.
No. I wanted to let you. That was a great ride, because I was along with you on the journey there. So many people, or kids who are studying in college, ask like, well, how do I get into autonomous vehicles or robotics? And kind of what you just described is is great inspiration for kind of how to do it. First of all, tinker, discover things, know what you like doing as young as possible. And then keep doing that, right? And then you can get into this space through many avenues. You were mechanically kind of engineering oriented. I was in electrical engineering, got into computer science, but then there's computer science. There's psychology, human factors, and there's so many different angles. It's kind of like pursue what you enjoy doing, and then, but don't let that define the rest of your life. Keep on iterating, and maybe you go from being a mechanical engineer to computer science, or vice versa. And I had a friend and a couple friends actually who were nuclear and they got their PhDs in nuclear engineering.
Wow.
And one's like a CFO of this one company, and then the other was also kind of financially oriented, ironically enough. But you can come into these things from different angles, and that's just really your foundation. And so that's inspiring, because your story is one of doing what you enjoy and let that sort of direct where you go. And here you are, the COO of DeLorean, which is like, again, a kind of company. And you touched on Jacksonville, and I want to just the Jacksonville Transportation Authority, because there's so many, the team that you just mentioned that I knew as well. What is your perspective on sort of the impact that program has had on the AV landscape? Obviously it's been a positive one from my perspective, but it was very early in terms of what I saw a lot of transportation authorities engaging in. So, and it was pre-pandemic when they really kind of kicked things off.
No, it's man, I think that they're making huge impacts and huge strides. There's been a lot of demonstrations with autonomous vehicles in different organizations in different municipalities and things like that. other things as far as the stuff that you and I worked on together with the vehicle that we deployed. I mean, I think we were one of the first ones to launch the AV Star on public streets. I mean, I remember taking our board of directors around Jacksonville in your vehicle. So what they're doing is amazing. Is it taking a long time? Absolutely. It's government. Everyone is looking at them under a microscope. You can't mess up. And you mentioned before, as far as how do you get into autonomous vehicles? How do you get into electric vehicles in the industry? You like what you touched on as far as like the clinical psychologists and things like that. That's a huge aspect of something that we didn't really understand or realize when we first started there. So I was responsible for their test track and setting up that facility out at Armsdale. And I think in our fleet, we had 3-4 autonomous vehicles when I left. We had, thousands and thousands of data points. We had a bunch of tests that we would run, and we weren't testing to make sure that the vehicle was operating properly. I figured you would do that, right? As a vehicle manufacturer, I trusted that you gave us a vehicle that was operating properly. So I wasn't worried about that. What we wanted to know is how the vehicle operated in different situations that it might come across in a typical day, right? Especially if you're operating in a downtown environment, one of the most difficult, landscapes to operate. And you can operate on a highway, like long-term trucking, long-range trucking. That's easy. You get in one lane and you go. Rural areas, you can just operate. You might have a deer come out, things like that. But if you're in an urban environment and you've got to make a left turn and you're in the right lane and just pick someone up, you've got to change lanes. You've got someone that's broken down. You've got construction. You happen to have someone that turned the wrong way on a one-way street, which I'm very familiar with growing up in Southwest Florida. That was very common. So like you've got to deal with this stuff. And they are going through the process of understanding how that works. How the vehicle identifies a street light, how the vehicles integrate into the city infrastructure that's already there, that's designed on technology that's decades old, but you don't want to change it because it works. Like all those boxes that operate the lights, that's old technology. How do you incorporate? We talked about working with RSUs, the roadside units, to communicate so you knew the signal when it was turning red, green, yellow, whatever it might be, giving priority to these vehicles. There's way more than people think that goes into operating these vehicles, especially on a fixed schedule that these shuttles would be on. You don't have a lot of flexibility where, you've got, so here in San Antonio, not too far away, we have Austin. There's a couple organizations that operate there. Cruise, Waymo. I don't know if they still do, but I know that they did and I've seen them. It's awesome. I love seeing these vehicles go around, but again, it's new technology. It's there's a lot of nuances to figure out how they operate. And what we determined and what we found, the technology is not what's lacking as far as advancing these type of vehicles in this industry. It's more the adoption of the public and those around these vehicles to understand how they work. So they operate differently than a typical vehicle where you can't make eye contact with an autonomous vehicle to signal like, hey, I'm walking across the street. Or when you're at a stop sign, making eye contact with an autonomous vehicle, you can't make eye contact and kind of have this understanding of who goes next. You can't do that. So it's going to be a slow roll to really get this adoption, and as people can adapt to autonomous vehicles. So that's what we understood. Also, there's the fear. We did a lot of surveys with people that we would do a ton of demos. We would go to events and we would have people ride on these vehicles to understand what their thoughts were, what their excitements were, what their fears were. And a lot of people were apprehensive to get on them. And once they got off, they were like, that was amazing. That was so easy. I sat down and it just went. So like there's a lot of education, I think, that goes with it, not just here's the technology, throw it out there. Same thing with EVs, as you mentioned the very beginning of our conversation, was people might think that there's a lot of failures with EVs, but I think there's just a hypersensitivity to EVs at this point, and it's dwindling. But there's also the autonomous vehicles that are incorporated into the infrastructure now that are slowly, gaining some ground, way more than there was, 3, 4 years ago. And there's a lot of companies doing great work that are fighting the good battle, and it's tough, and it's a really tough environment. And I definitely want to give credit to those companies doing that, because it's a lot of work. It's a
Yeah.
lot of work. And so, it's just, you got to get into it. And I didn't really know much about autonomous vehicles before I started that role, which I think was good, because I went in there with a clear head and a clean slate. And I just approached it as an engineer, as someone who's data driven, who likes to figure things out. What do I want to know to get these vehicles operating? And the test side of things was a perfect role for me, because I could work with experts like you that says, hey, this is how the vehicle operates. We've done our vehicle shakedown. We know that it operates exactly how we want. But then, is that really how I want it to operate? Just because you want it to operate this way, I know it operates correctly, but is that how I want it to operate as a customer and as someone who's going to be managing these vehicles? And that was another big step where, some organizations are very conservative, where a good example was in traffic, you can't stop 30, 40, 50 feet behind the vehicle in front of you in a downtown
Right.
environment, because someone's going to cut you off. Someone's going to be like, what the heck's this guy doing? Like, and they have cut you off. You end up going nowhere. But also, you can't just run into the person in front of you. Like, you've got to have this balance. And so, as a person driving, it's amazing the amount of calculations that you're subconsciously doing in your head as you're approaching a yellow light, a red light, a green light with someone crossing that might not know that's running. Maybe it's an elderly person with a walker. Maybe it's a family with a couple little kids that are struggling to get them across. Like, that happens to me all the time. I'm trying to cross the road and I've got a couple kids I'm dragging. So, like, you've got to understand how all these situations work, and it can be difficult. Is it a cinder
Yeah.
block in the middle of the road, or is it a paper bag? I
Yeah.
can differentiate, but an autonomous vehicle might not be able to do that. So that's where I think it's going to be adapting to these vehicles and the adoption of the technology to understand that it's not a person. It operates differently, but it still operates according to its requirements, and it's still safe. But what is that? What does safe mean? So and again, that's a whole other conversation, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
that's
it's
all.
a, it's it's funny how you mentioned, yeah, and it's true. There's the AV world. I've been doing it for 20 years, so I've had a
Mhm.
lot of exposure to
Yeah.
good folks like yourself to get
Mhm.
to get feedback and all that. But there can be this disconnect between what the AV company is providing and what,
Mhm.
of course, that particular customer, which may be even cultural or regional, wants,
Yeah.
expects. What
Yeah.
you want in New York versus what you want in South Florida is different. Actually, we were in a community, a retirement community in South Florida with one of our vehicles, and they had iguanas, like like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
crawling across the road, right?
Yeah.
And our vehicle stopped for the iguana, and the older gentleman next to me is like, "Can you just run those over?"
Yeah. He's like, can you veer over and kill it so that they get rid of them?
Because
Yeah.
yeah, and so I mean, he was joking, I think, but but it there is this sort of question, like, of, well, not of specifically, do you run the iguanas over or not, but like, it's there are these things that are just different culturally. I know, like, we were operating in England,
Mm.
in Coventry, and it was a very busy kind of urban environment, and was near a university, and folks would starve the vehicle out if it weren't a little bit more aggressive and kind of inching forward,
Yeah.
because people would just keep on walking,
Right.
even if they weren't supposed to walk, right? So you kind
Yeah.
of, like, so we as a human driver, what we do is we kind of inch forward. So,
Yeah.
and so what we learned, our lesson learned from a lot of this is you have to make it very configurable and adaptable,
Yeah.
because you can't, one sort of methodology isn't going to apply to all of your deployments.
Right.
And it's just going to be, and you have to be able to tailor it. Like, they're just
Hmm.
different rules, right? How
Yeah.
you drive in India is going to be a lot different from how you drive in the middle of nowhere in Idaho,
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah. Absolutely.
so,
Absolutely. For sure.
and, yeah, cause it's just a lot, you've seen some of these, and I use India as an example because I have a lot of, friends and colleagues who talk to me about how, complex the traffic patterns can get in
Right.
some of these more urban centers, of course.
Sure.
But,
Yeah.
so it's interesting, yeah, we talked about some of the key lessons, with autonomy, but what's your sort of takeaway now that you've had time to kind of, you're now with DeLorean, and maybe, who knows, you might be doing autonomy there, but what are your thoughts on the state of the AV industry? You see, kind of, we're focused on geofenced applications. There's the
Yep.
robo taxis. There's what the Teslas are doing, and other organizations.
Yeah.
What's your take on just the AV space? Are we way? Is it much further out there than we think? Um,
I would say that's a tough one, right?
yeah,
There's so many different applications.
yes,
And so with all the studies that I've read and all the testing that I've done and all the people I've talked to, there's a lot of different applications for it. So my wife's minivan has adaptive cruise control, has lane keep. I love that thing. And I will take it. I drove it from Florida to here. It was a 20-hour drive. I did it in 2 days. It was amazing, right? Because I just was able to kind of set the cruise control. And if there was a little traffic, it'd slow down, speed up. Anyway, so it's definitely a tool. And I think that's how you have to look at it, at least right now, where you've got all these different levels of autonomy being introduced into vehicles. And I think that what's happening is that people see these tools and they keep pushing them further and further as a customer, where you see people and, pick on Tesla right now, they're full self-driving. That's phenomenal technology. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the technology. And there's people way smarter than me that are developing this that can go into the details of how it works. But as an operator of that vehicle, you still have to be in control and responsible for that vehicle. For now, that's how I see it on the consumer side before you get into the fully autonomous vehicles that are operating as like robo taxis and things. And that's where I think that people take advantage of this technology that's so advanced, but it still requires someone to at least operate and pay attention to the vehicle. Again, some people might come at me and rebuttal that and say no, you should be able to drive it on your own. It's called full self driving, this and that. I'm not arguing the benefit of the technology and the advancement of the technology. I think it's incredible. And then you've got the robo taxis and the vehicles that operate in San Francisco, Austin, these other places. Again, that's phenomenal technology that I think is advancing, but it's tough. I think some people are trying to push on it too hard and force it into certain areas. But is it because you have to do that to advance technology? You've got to innovate. You've got to force the situation to be uncomfortable to push it to the next level. So do I think they're doing the wrong thing? By no means. No, I think they're doing the right thing. And again, I don't know. This is a really difficult question. And then the stuff that I know that you're doing that we worked on together, I think that was advancing in more of the fleet side, the fixed route. And I think that's another area. So personally, where I think that this can really advance, and I think that people can really adopt this, is what we talked about for the long haul trucking, where you can put the autonomous in there, you can do platooning. So you can have 4 trucks and you can have one person operating the front truck and you've got 3 vehicles behind it. and you can go thousands of miles, and you can have really just one person operating 4 trucks. Well, or you can have one person in each truck and just keep leapfrogging. And then the other 3 trucks, they can be sleeping, they can be resting. And this way, you're just constantly operating from coast to coast. So there's a lot of different ways you can use this technology. But to become fully adapted or adopted and fully adopted in the industry and adapted to the way people operate, I personally think you're still years and years away until I can go get a new minivan and my wife gets in and she just hits, uh, going to the store, going to drop the kids off at school, going to work, and I get in my car and I say, okay, I'm going to pick up the kids from school. I'm, going to the grocery store. That's a long ways off, and I think that it might be, you know, I think first and last mile is the most difficult. Getting out of my neighborhood is going to be very difficult. But once you're on those main streets to get to the local grocery store, I think it's going to be easy. But then navigating within that parking lot, I can barely navigate within that parking lot. So I think there's a lot that goes into those little nuanced interactions. That's going to take a while. But I think that the use on the highways and those benefits for making sure people, if they fall asleep, to be able to take over and maybe get them to a safe place. Things like that, sleep detection, distracted driving. I think there's a lot of ways that this technology is going to filter down into the rest of the vehicles. You've got the very high end where you've got the most advanced, Tesla, Waymo, which you guys are doing, things like that. That's going to start trickling down, just like I've got lane keep in my minivan. Eventually, I'm going to have something a little more advanced where it's going to help me get my kids to school a little safer. It's going to help me get places, a little faster based on, maybe route, integrating with my Google Maps to take me on the best route. Things like that, or maybe I can set it to fuel efficiency so that it knows that the light ahead of me is going to be turning green in 15 seconds. So instead of rushing up to it at 60 miles an hour, my vehicle says, hey, slow down to 40, and you can cruise right through that light. It not only saves, gas, but you'll also be saving time because there's no one ahead of you. So you don't need to slow down and speed up. You can glide right through it. So I think it's going to be more towards optimization of driving and optimization of safety. And then eventually, as that technology trickles down, the adoption is going to be raised, and eventually, I think they're going to meet in the middle somewhere.
I think that's an excellent that's an excellent analysis. I agree with you 100%. And one of the things, just on the autonomy side, we've always been focused on like kind of level 4, and of course at one point level 5.
Right.
Autonomy, full autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
And but as a revenue driven organization, you adapt to what the customer needs, and especially with buses and larger transit vans, the applicability of this technology for what they call level 1, 2, 3, ADAS type functionality
exactly.
is a slam dunk. It's like the light bulb should have gone off a long while ago. But it's like this technology. We have sensors all around the periphery of the vehicle. We can see things with this technology that we as human beings can't see from just that one seat in the vehicle. So you can imagine school buses and transit vans or whatever. You've got blind spot detection everywhere for kids or anything. You can detect anything and be able to react. It might cost a little bit more. It might cost, at scale, 20,000, or I don't know what it would, whatever it might be per vehicle. But that's life-saving technology that you can put on these buses and like now. And so I think that's I know consumer grade cars and vehicles have their these assistive technologies that you just mentioned, but even these larger vehicles can start to have them.
Hmm.
and I think
Yeah.
bring immediate advantages to safety today. So I think that's
Hmm.
an excellent analysis. Trucking is
Hmm.
a great application. It's going to be an interesting one
Yeah.
as well.
Hmm.
So but
Yeah.
that's autonomy, which is one thing. But what's really interesting is brewing. And I'm going to transition completely to a
Yeah.
different industry here because it was always of interest to me. Well, I mean, what inspired you to get into brewing? And what were you doing back in the day there?
Well, it's just like anything. I had a passion and it's something I wanted to do. And I mentioned a little earlier as we were talking about moving into different industries, whether it was, I worked at a power plant for a while. I did some defense contracting. I did, at Celine, Coda, Fisker, whatever it is. The the foundation of everything and the foundation of how I live my life is engineering. That's the fundamentals. You've got a problem, you can fix it. And I've got a good buddy, and he always says, he's like, you can always engineer your life to the way you want. And it's a really good way of looking at it. So I always liked brewing. I liked the social aspect of, going to a bar, trying something new, and sharing that experience with my friends, talking to the bartender. And at the time, I was living in Southern California. I was like blocking from the beach. I'd ride my bike up and down to everywhere I needed to go. And there was a bar there. I think it's still there. It was called Naja's in Redondo Beach. If anyone ever goes to Redondo Beach, go to Naja's by the pier. It's probably the best dive bar in the world. And they've got like 100 different beers. And I had a buddy that would ride his bike south. I ride my bike north. We meet there. And again, the engineering side of me would look at things and say, okay, well, this consists of water, grain, hops, and yeast. Every single beer, that's what it is. There's some adjuncts like, rice or oats and things like that if you want to change it up a little bit. But essentially, those are the four ingredients. And I would start making beer in my garage. I lived on a hill and my garage faced the road, and I would just make beer in my garage. And I'd have my friends come over. We have beer parties, and I'd always say, if you come over, excuse me, bring a beer you've never tried before. And so as I was brewing, my friends would come over, they'd bring all these new wild different kinds of beers and we would drink them and we'd talk about them. And I mean, it's like a real nerdy beer engineer thing like that. You could like all my friends were engineers. So like we're pretty nerdy, right? And so as we're going through this, people be walking by, they'd smell it, they'd come in. And it was just a really fun experience. I kept making beer and I eventually kept making too much that I could drink. And so I would start selling it to my friends, giving it away. And as I would sell it, that would help me get rid of it and it would help me buy new equipment. So my little home brewing operation turned into a pretty sophisticated operation where I had all the steps, right? I had hot liquor tanks, I'd have the mash tun, I had the brew kettle, and I would strain, I had, fermenters, heat exchangers, I had all these different things. And I just loved it. And at the time, I was in California. There's a huge beer scene. This is 2011, 2012. Things are really starting to blow up in the beer scene. And it all comes back to you've got parts, you've got unique components, you put them together. How you put them together gives you the end result, whether it's a car, whether it's a LiDAR, whether it's an autonomous vehicle with LiDAR and hardware and sensors and cables, whatever it is, you put it together, you go through the process, and it finishes. So Coda ended up going out of business, and I was at this, point in my life where I had to make a decision what I wanted to do. Wanted to take a break from the automotive industry, and I had an opportunity to move back to Florida, to Punta Gorda, and I had an opportunity to start a brewery there. I had a lot of traction. I knew that people liked what I was making, so I convinced my girlfriend at the time, who we've been dating for a couple months. I said, "Hey, why don't you move to Florida with me? We'll start a brewery." And I convinced her, and she said yes. And now she's my wife, and I love her dearly. So it all worked out pretty well. We got 2 kids. We're pretty happy. I mean, I should say we're very happy. Pretty happy with the decision to go back to Florida is more what I should say. As far as we get there and we start this brewery, and we had to create this from scratch, and we create this environment and this community in Punta Gorda, bringing all these people together over beer and how we make it. And I thought I would be the brewer in the back. No one would want to talk to me, and I could just do my thing. Well, what I realized is that they wanted to talk to me. They wanted to see the person making the beer. They wanted to talk to the brewer. So I ended up going through and really kind of honing my skills of giving tours, talking to people about the way the brewing process. And it was just a lot of fun. And it ended up being an opportunity where I learned a lot about business. I learned a lot about making beer. I learned about dealing with the government. I learned about customer service. I learned about finding partners with the industry, supply chain. I mean, we were selling beer to I think 75% of the state of Florida, within a couple of years. So it was a lot of fun. I love brewing. We went to Beer Fest. We met again some amazing people. And every industry is so unique in the way that there's a culture around every industry. In the automotive industry, there's a culture. In the beer industry, there's a culture. And the beer industry is like such this grassroots kind of bootstrapped industry. And it was all of us little guys against the big guys. So even though my product may be competing directly with another brewery, if I needed a bag of grain or something, or something happened, my yeast got infected, I could call them and be like, hey, I need 50 pounds of pale malt, and I just miscounted my inventory. Can I come get a couple bags of grain? They'd be like, sure, no problem. And then a couple months later, they're like, hey, I ran out of hops. Do you guys have any Citra or something? And I'm like, here you go. Here's 2 pounds. And so it really worked out where everyone's working together, but it was like this camaraderie and competition all at the same time. But we weren't putting each other out of business. It was kind of us for us, the David versus Goliath kind of thing. And it was a lot of fun. And then eventually, through a business decision and kind of where the industry was, we ended up selling the brewery, and I got back into engineering and consulting and, what I would consider hardcore engineering compared to the brewing industry. But it all goes back to what we talked about before, Paul, with it's got the fundamental base of engineering. Like you talked about, young, students going through the kind of climbing the ranks now, going through school, trying to figure out what they want to do. There's so much opportunity in every industry that if you just keep your eyes open and you listen to what people are saying, there's an opportunity everywhere. There's a ton of engineering in the brewing industry. It's just like put a car together. You're putting components together. There's a ton of opportunity in the autonomous vehicle industry, whether it be a component, whether you're making LiDAR, whether you're actually, generating code and programming, whether you're developing a systems, hardware, software. I mean, there's a ton of opportunity everywhere. You've just got to see what it is you like to do and what you're good at and what you want to do. And then from there, you can kind of move into whatever industry you want. And that gives you the opportunity to really grow and expand. Even though I've been in other industries, I can jump back and forth because engineering is engineering, right? The laws of thermodynamics and fluids stay the same. Heat transfer stays the same. Calculus is always the same. 1 + 1 is always 2 for the most part, right? So that's kind of how I got into beer, and I still enjoy the industry. We've got pictures of my daughter when she was 1 year old, in the brewery, and she still loves going to breweries now. We have daddy daughter days, and we've just been fortunate that we've had the opportunity to do that stuff. Yeah.
That's fantastic. It's as if you knew I was going to ask about the intersection of engineering and brewing, and that's perfect. That's it. There? I mean, I haven't. I would brewed some beer, homebrew, maybe 20, 25 years ago. It's been a long, long while. And, but I remember The process took a long time. At
Hmm.
least it took me a long time. Is there any automation these days that for home brewing that's kind of cropped up, or is it still sort of the same process as it's been for 25 years or so?
I mean, I think the same fundamental process has been the same process for thousands of years. You basically get some sugar and
Yeah,
you let the yeast eat it. And I'd always give tours, and you kind of go through the process of this is where you get the sugar out of the grain. You boil it, you have the hops, you cool it down, and then it's like this is the fermenter. You add the yeast, and the byproduct is that the yeast eats the sugar, and it farts CO2 and it pisses alcohol, and that's beer. But that's it. Now you got beer.
that's how long it's going to take. Yeah. So
But yeah,
we're not going to see sort of the Keurig for beer anytime soon, I guess,
I
is what you're
don't think
saying.
so. I don't think so. I mean, if you're looking at 10-day to 6-week process, but as far as the process along the way, there's a ton of automation. There's temperature control. There's how much grain do you add. There's a lot of transferring from one pump to the next. Cleaning.
Yeah.
75% of brewing's cleaning. So as you're cleaning, you've got to make sure that it's properly cleaned. You've got to have sensors to detect their safety. Because some of these tanks you fill them up with CO2, and if you've got a 1,000-gallon tank full of CO2 and you leave it open, that CO2 is going to drain down, and if you're near there, that can be hazardous. Or let's say you stick your head in a manway in a tank full of CO2, you've got problems. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of automation with making sure the process flows, it's controlled. Another big one is the canning operation, and where not only is the making of the cans. So I was at the ball plants in Tampa, and I was watching them make our cans, and these things are going by so fast, it's just a blur. And once in a while you see one just like ping, 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 they're being shot off the line as these things are coming by, and there's cameras and sensors detecting defects in the cans, and it's going so fast and detecting where it is by the time it gets to the little boot that kicks it off. That, I mean, it's flicking these cans off because there's a defect in the print of the label or the can or something. So there's a ton of automation. And then when you're actually canning, filling the can, seaming it, inspecting it. So just like anything, there's a ton of automation with maintaining the process. And the beauty of it is that if you can get your automation dialed in, then that's where you get back. And now you're back to the repeatability from the beginning. We talked about cars and reliability. If you could dial in that automation, just like a car or anything else, if it's dialed in, then you can repeat that same beer over and over. And that was what I really, really focused on, is that I set up our facility just like an automotive manufacturing plant. I had a very small, like 15 gallon kind of R&D, which we do all the really weird stuff. And if we had some promise, we'd move it to our pilot system, which is a 3-barrel system. It's about 100 gallons, not too big. But that's where I'd start to develop the process and source the materials from a wholesale manufacturer. Whatever was brewed on that system, I had to make sure I got it from our production suppliers. Once we dialed that in, I could then transfer it to our larger system where that was the volume production. So that's how I got from making those one-offs, those really unique one-offs, to actually producing consistent, reliable product. And that's where a lot of people in the industry didn't do that. And they could produce one beer that was amazing one time, but they couldn't do it a second time. And so that's where a lot of those places have kind of fallen by the wayside, because they were able to do it one off. And a lot of those are still there, and they make a lot of great beer, but it's different every time. And that's not always, is that good beer? It tastes phenomenal. I'll give you that. But it goes back to the Bud Light, where you've got this quality aspect of, yeah, beer is repeated the same time, the same way, over and over every time. So there's a lot of different aspects of kind of who you want to be and what you want to do. And again, that all comes into engineering, it comes into data, taking measurements. I would take measurements and I collect data throughout the whole process. And if it varied, I could make corrections. And so that's where, back to your question, automation, if you know what it's supposed to be and you collect data along the way, you can automate anything. So
Yeah.
absolutely, there's opportunity in that industry, just like any industry. Excuse me, I think.
And I think I read somewhere way back when that it was like in the 70s that there was some law change that really gave birth to the rise of microbrewing
Hmm.
and home brewing. I don't remember exactly what that law was, but I remember there were some weird laws on the books back then. And of
Yeah.
course, if there weren't those laws, we would have never had Smoking the Bandit. Because wasn't that, again, speaking to inspiring movies, um,
Yeah.
wasn't that the thing where they had to get Coors Light um, to the East Coast or West Coast or something where
Right.
it wasn't allowed to be distributed
Yeah.
or something?
That's right. Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. And then the whole
so
distribution. Yeah. Absolutely. There.
there's the fusion of autonomy and brewing right there. Just an autonomous tractor trailer, and
For
a
sure.
and a Trans Am just gunning it across the United States with a truckload of beer
Yeah.
autonomously.
Right. But I'd want to drive the Trans Am. I wouldn't want that thing on its own.
Oh, of course, yeah. And who wouldn't want Sally Fields, kind of to pick her up along the way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that I love that movie. That movie's fantastic. Yeah, there's so much good coming out of that.
It's hilarious. And Jackie Gleason, of course, God
Hmm.
rest his soul,
Yeah.
was of course a classic character.
Yep.
um, well, I guess yeah, just kind of a couple closing questions. I mean, it's been fascinating, a journey through the automotive space and from how one tinkers to getting into that world to what you're doing with DeLorean, autonomy, beer brewing. It's been
Hmm.
fascinating journey. But as you kind of like look into the future, I guess what's exciting you most about the automotive landscape in particular, as it relates to maybe not just autonomy but the electrification that's taking place.
Uh, we kind of talked about it a little bit before, where a lot of the big players are getting involved. And with that, just like in the autonomous field, LiDAR 10 years ago were probably tens of thousands of dollars a piece. Whereas now you might, I don't even know what they are now. I mean, it's getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So that technology and everything that allows for these very high end and very sophisticated vehicles to operate in small confined environments, by pushing those limits and by doing that, you get organizations that are now looking to incorporate this. And it may not be, available to the regular consumer like myself at this point, but eventually it will be. And I think that as it gets cheaper and more readily accessible, it's going to get better and better. So even on my car, my wife's minivan, we have the blind spot detector. Well, that was unheard of, when I was growing up. But now that every car has that, and that sensor's not expensive. That's a commodity at this point. So I think as these high technology opportunities with automation or in these autonomous vehicles is being pushing the limits. And as you said, right now it might be a $20,000 option. In the future, it's just going to be another it's just going to be another standard feature on these vehicles. So I think that as the bigger players put these things into production, you got some smaller players like us. You've got these new players like the Lucids and the Rivians that are putting out some incredible technology, and they're hopefully going to kind of spread that wealth across the rest of the industry. And as the standard opportunity, or as the standard for vehicles with the miles per kilowatt hour goes from 2.5 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, and those efficiencies keep growing, batteries can get smaller and smaller with the same range. Or you could have an option where, hey, I want to go on a trip or whatever it might be. I don't have the opportunity to charge all the time. I've got a 150 kilowatt hour battery pack that gets 8 miles per kilowatt hour. What is that? 1,000 mile range? No, what is that? Yeah, pretty close, huh? No,
I was
600
told
mile
there'd be
range.
no math today.
I know. Sorry, 600-mile range. You can edit that out, right? But your range is so much more than it is right now, where you're just expanding. Uh, no, that's hold on. What's one? Okay, you can edit this out. What's 150 times 8? That's a lot. That's a 1,200-mile range, right?
Well, let's see. That's a 700 and 7,500. No, times 8. Yeah, geez. Well, it's 1,500 minus 300, so that's 1,200.
There you go. That's right. Okay, that's what I said. 1,200 miles.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
edit that back in the 1,200-mile range.
Well, keep this in. It just shows.
It just shows it.
Keep it
As you get
genuine.
older, yeah, the math goes away. But anyways, as this starts happening, I think the variability of the vehicle selection is going to change as well. And as we talked before, the technology is going to keep advancing. And I mean, I don't remember, and I've got a funny story after this, but you used to have to crank the car to start it up, back when, cars really started taking off. You used to have to crank it. Well, no one would ever think of that now. You've got a starter, you've got an alternator, you've got all this technology that now is old technology, and people just know it. Just like if you were to release a car, imagine releasing an F-150, 100 years ago when, cars didn't go that fast. Imagine having this huge truck that's got a bed on it. It's got 4 doors. It's got, 400 or 500 horsepower, and it goes 125 miles an hour. People wouldn't know what to do with it, and they'd be killing each other left and right. But now that's like the most that's like the most popular vehicle in the country. That's that. So I mean, things are going to change, and if people don't push the limits, and if people don't get scared once in a while, nothing's going to change. Safety needs to be priority number one, obviously. Always stand behind that. But as these things get pushed to the limits, and the things that you're doing and these other autonomous companies are doing, those sensors, that processing, technology, and that those features are going to become, for lack of a better word, they're going to become to the point of being mundane, that they're on every vehicle. Whereas right now they're cutting edge, and who knows the stuff you'll be working on when this technology becomes mundane. So that's how I see it happening. I think that's the way it is with any technology, right? You've got the early adopters that come in and they just want whatever's new and they want to do it. And great, good thing we have those people. Then you got the people like my dad, who he's going to buy whatever's cheap, whatever's available. But whatever's available when he buys a car, it's going to have adaptive cruise control. It's going to have lane keeping, and he's just going to have it. It's not going to be the latest technology. So I also see a lot more opportunity with EDUs, electric drive units, high voltage powertrain technology, batteries. I think that technology is growing and expanding and advancing very rapidly. I think there's a lot of big players. I think the supply chain is becoming more advanced, so they can provide the technology, they can provide the parts. And I think that the demand is no longer surpassing the supply. I think we're starting to get a balance where there's going to be a lot of competition. We talked earlier about the EV prices coming down. I think that some of these unique components are going to become more commodities. And I think at that point, the industry is really going to start to focus on kind of the novel technology of how to use it, not the technology being novel. I think it's going to be more the integration in how it's being used instead of the technology on its own. So I definitely see some advancement. I think it's going to work out pretty well. And the story I wanted to touch real quick was that I was going to say, I don't ever remember cranking my car over when I had to go to school in the morning, which is funny because on the way to school the other day, I was driving my daughter, and she's like, "Dad, how did you get to school when you were in elementary school?" And I was like, I rode the bus. Why are you asking? How do you think I got to school? I was a little nervous to ask. She goes, "Well, I just figured you took a horse and carriage." I'm like, "How old do you think I am?" And she's 6. And I go, "I'm not that old, sweetie. I had a bus. I rode a bus when I was your age." So, man, talk about feeling old. So That's how we wrapped up our drive to school the other day. But yeah, that's
Well,
where I think it's going. Yeah.
that's fantastic, and
Yeah.
that's a great way to wrap up this this conversation.
Great.
Knowing that you're not as old as your daughter thought you were,
Yeah.
but you look younger every day, Bill. I don't know how you do it,
Thanks, Paul.
and but this has been great. It's been a great catching
Yep.
up and just a fascinating conversation about all the topics from
Absolutely.
autonomy to automotive. And I thank you. Appreciate your time, and
Mhm.
best of luck with what you're doing at DeLorean. And I look
Yep.
forward to being a customer. I love the DeLorean car. So keep an eye out for your next announcement.
Absolutely. Well, I'll do everything I can to make it worth your while, Paul. But yeah, thanks for having me. I always enjoy talking with you. So this was fantastic. And hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Likewise. Thank you, Bill.
Okay.
I hope you enjoyed the show Driven with me, Paul Perrone, your host. Don't forget to check us out at driven.show on the web and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. Thank you for listening in. See you soon.